It felt like there were two different versions of me in a way. I just did not know what I wanted to do.
I gotta ask about host homes. What's that whole thing like?
They looked me in the eye and said, no, you're not ready for that.
Will your first book be called Mailroom Ministry?
It's a good question. I started to have a crisis of faith. You know, I'm 20 years old. That second year specifically was one of the hardest years of my life.
What is it about what we do that keeps you here? Welcome to Changed Lives, a special limited series in which I explore the incredible stories of the people behind the scenes at Life Action, a ministry with a mission of reviving relationships through transformative events. Each of these individuals, my co-workers, have experienced God move in big and unexpected ways. The more I heard their stories, the more I thought, people need to hear this. In this series, you'll get a first-hand look at how God is working in and through the people of Life Action, the challenges they face, the faith that sustains them, and the lives being transformed along the way. Their stories are powerful. Today I'm talking with Bryce, a former row team member who now spends his time helping in our mailroom and investing in the young people who volunteer at Life Action Camp. And he's actually raising support right now to serve with the people and culture staff at Life Action. We talk about the moment something finally clicked while on the road and how an encounter with Jesus began to transform not just his faith, but all of his relationships. You'll hear the story of a reluctant yes, a quiet surrender, and a deepening passion for discipleship that still fuels him today. As you listen, consider how your own story might ripple into someone else's. Life Action is powered by prayer, generosity, and this kind of personal transformation Bryce shares in this conversation. Maybe God's inviting you to be a part of it. Enjoy this conversation with Bryce. Today, I am joined by Bryce Howard, and I want to thank you for coming in and for agreeing to talk to me about your story. So if someone approached you today, grocery store, elevator, and said, "Hey, who are you? What do you do?" How would you answer that question?
I would say that I am the mailroom coordinator at a nonprofit called Life Action. I handle all things mail, as you could probably tell from the title, but I handle more things, things like printing projects.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of letters that go out of Life Action,
So
and I do
many.
a good portion of those. I also do order fulfillment for our online store that we have.
Great. Okay, that's a good description. I want to start back, and I want to talk about little Bryce Howard.
Okay. He hasn't been, there wasn't much of little.
Okay, all right, not little in size, maybe
Yeah.
little in age.
Sure.
So tell me where you're from. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Arkansas, very central Arkansas, like 30 minutes outside of Little Rock. It was, you know, the typical American middle class life. My dad was in the military and my mom was a teacher. And so we lived a really comfortable middle class life. There was never, my parents both come from backgrounds where they, at some point in their lives, didn't have a ton of money. And so there was never a time where my brother and I really questioned if we had money to put food on the table, which is really nice. So we grew up in that sort of a household. I grew up in a Christian home. It was very what I would call nowadays culturally Christian. You just went to church, and that was like the default setting for a lot of people was you just go to church whenever the doors were open, and that was our posture. We would go, and my parents were both Christians before they started a family.
Gotcha.
And so from age 0 up through, graduating through high school, I was always in the church. And that was just kind of the background, the cultural background that I had.
Did you go to public school or private school?
I went to public school.
Okay.
So all K through 12 public school.
So how was that, being a kid that went to church but also in public school? Because sometimes those things...
Right. It was very uncomfortable at times. And it wasn't even uncomfortable because I was such a dedicated follower of Jesus. It was uncomfortable because it felt like there were two different versions of me in a way. Not that I would act a different way when I was in different places, but there was this tension of I would go to church and I always had kind of the good kid role that I played. But then I would go to school and I wouldn't be as good of a kid, but I would still not really go to parties or not and all my friends were jocks. I was on the basketball team. So all my friends were like the athletes who were out drinking and partying, and I just never did that. And it was there was this tension that I kind of carried with me.
You're like living in both.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable at times. People would ask me why I wouldn't go out, and I would probably give a really good Christian answer, but I didn't really mean that all the time. Like, most of the time, I was just kinda scared to go out.
Really?
That's a huge part of my, like, salvation story is I grew up as kind of the good kid who nobody really expected to get in trouble, everybody
Mhm.
kinda trusted, and on the external, I was all of those things. I projected to be all of those things, but on the inside, who I actually was, I was a mess. I
Mhm.
was struggling so deeply with sin, and I was unkind to my family, and I was struggling with my own personal addictions to lust and those kinds of things, especially as a teenage kid. In
Mhm.
today's culture is
Mhm.
just so pervasive. And so I projected really, really well, but when I would come home or when I was, really myself, I was none of those things
Did you
actually.
recognize that tension? Like, did you feel like shame about that, or
Hmm.
were you just able to compartmentalize?
I'm a super external person
Mhm.
most of the time. I'm really extroverted, love relationships, love people. And so growing up, before I became emotionally aware, I think I registered that there was a tension, but I didn't register what it was,
Mhm.
probably for multiple reasons. I was probably scared to really dive into those feelings and register what they actually were. But then I just, like, didn't know. I didn't know to do that
Yeah.
because the house that I grew up in, not that my parents, told me, like, "Don't process your feelings,"
Yeah,
or
yeah.
anything like that. Just the culture around me was never emotionally aware.
Mhm.
I just didn't register what was going on, even though I probably, looking back, did feel that
Mhm.
tension.
And did your salvation was that something that happened to you in high school or after?
So I thought it was something that happened to me when I was 14. I believe it was an encounter with Jesus. I had
Mhm.
this encounter with Jesus where, it was very much repent or you're going to go to hell type thing. And it was kind of fear driven. And I was scared. Like, I was honestly just really scared. And so I had this encounter with Jesus where I said some things, but there was no transformation that
Mhm.
actually happened. There was no actual repentance. And it wasn't until I got on the road and I started to see people who actually lived what they believed,
Mhm.
or lived what they said they believed. I was really confronted with the gap that I had between what I said I believed and what I actually did believe. Jesus, by the Spirit, really confronted me with things that were going on in my life that just were not okay.
Mhm.
And I finally came to a point about halfway through my first year of being on the road where I said, okay, Jesus, like, fine, you know? And I, for the first time, actually trusted Jesus
Mhm.
and repented. And I didn't even register at the time that that was my salvation moment. But that was the first time that I repented and believed
Hmm.
because there was something in me that knew I needed to.
It's incredible that it happens while you're working for
Yeah.
a revival ministry, right? And
Yeah.
there are countless stories of that happening about these Christian kids joining a ministry, and
Mhm.
then they're actually saved
Right.
on the road.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There is something
Yeah.
about the living what you said you were gonna
Yes.
do and actually living it that is very eye-opening and
Absolutely.
creates that context for transformation that you guys are going into every church every week trying to create the context for that transformation, which happens on a big church level,
Yeah.
but then it happens in this micro level of
Yes.
the team members.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Absolutely.
So how do you get to Life Action? Because
Mm.
we kind of skipped to your story,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
But let me backtrack and say, how do you go from Bryce in high school to then
Yeah.
joining Life Action?
I had no idea what I
Mhm,
wanted to do with my life.
mhm,
Even up to senior year in high school, I just did not know what I wanted to do. And so this was February of 2019. A road team, a Life Action road team, came to my church. Still had no idea what I was going to do. I think I had applied to one college, and they came, and I don't really remember the teachings. I don't really remember much else other than the people. I was in the youth group at the time, and they came and they hung out and they taught. And I, again, don't exactly remember the content, but I remember falling in love with the people and falling in love with the culture. And people, I said I had this kind of good kid persona. That I had people come to me who were in my church who were like, this seems like something you would do, and
mm,
you should maybe pursue this. And so there was a little bit of like I wanted to do it, but I also kind of felt like I needed to do it, even though like there wasn't really a paradigm in my mind for what a real Christian was yet.
yeah.
And so I applied and I kind of just said, okay, God, like if you want me to do this, then it'll happen. And I got in, and it was obviously looking back, God's grace of just like He knew exactly where my heart was at. but he allowed and orchestrated for me to be able to join this group, for me to realize things that I
Mm.
needed to realize. And so I got accepted in March of 2019. And then that following summer, I went to staff training and spent 4 years with Life Action.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. And you came on originally to what role?
I was a children's minister at first.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to be in the band. I had sang for a long time.
Okay.
And I had just kind of grown up doing it like my dad. He loves music. He doesn't know how to play music, but he loves it.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go on car rides, and every time I was in the car with my dad, he would just like pop on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always sing to the radio. Eventually, people started telling me, like, hey, you're good at this. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's awesome. Great.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. It was super fun. But I didn't know how to play any instruments. And so when I initially applied, I wanted to be in the band, but all the band spots had been
Gotcha.
filled. And so they were like, but we have this children's minister role. Don't know if you want to do that. And I love kids. Like, I love hanging out with kids. I tend to be kind of a, chill, fun guy when I'm with the kids. And so I was like, sure, I'll be a children's minister. I really just wanted to travel. It wasn't about like being a children's minister.
You're like, I'll do anything.
Right.
Just let me get on the bus.
I'll like go do whatever you want me to do. I
Mhm.
just want to hang out,
Yeah.
know? And so that's what I did. I got in as a children's minister my first year and then multiple roles after that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. How did you like being a children's minister?
It was a challenge for me. I was 19. I did not understand what it meant to be in a role that you didn't exactly want to be in, but
Mhm.
still do a good job at it.
Mm-hmm.
I, along the way, had moments where I was like, I'm just going to do the best that I can at this. And I think I did in some ways. In other ways, I was a 19-year-old kid who was not mature enough to be able to do that. And so there were times where it was really difficult and I would just go in, do my thing and go and get out. I did really enjoy the fun of it because, you're a children's minister. You got, 12-year-olds in there who are just like, they don't want to hear like really hardcore biblical theology. Like they want to play a game with a ball,
Right. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so those kinds of things were super, super fun. But overall, it was like kind of a challenge for me at times.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially if that's not where your passion probably
Yeah,
lies
yeah.
and thinking, I'm just going to get to play with some kids.
Right.
But, actually, I have to teach them how to follow Jesus.
Right.
I mean, a little bit of a big objective.
Sure.
Yeah. So that would be difficult. So what team did you join?
I joined the blue team.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Steve and
So
Debbie.
Steve and Debbie.
Yep.
And after your first year, you decide to come back out.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what other roles did you assume over the time?
Well, so about halfway through that first year, we had some health complications with one of the worship leaders that was already on stage. And so Jimmy and Lori, my team pastors at the time, they contacted me and asked if I could kind of step into a worship leader role part-time along with doing children's ministries. So for the second half of that first year, I was kind of both.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I slowly transitioned into the new role I was in, which was like what I would call an on-stage worship leader. So
Mhm.
like in front of everyone, I was the guy singing, playing guitar, all that good stuff. But then behind the scenes, I wouldn't really make any of the decisions. It was more
Gotcha.
just like on stage.
Mhm.
And then that last year, my fourth year, I transitioned into being in charge of the band, at least partially. There was another guy who was also in charge with me,
Yeah.
but I was in more of a leadership role over the band that last year. So,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
Did you like the trajectory of those transitions? Do you feel like that was more of a fit for you or what?
I think from a day-to-day operations perspective, it was more of a fit for me. That was where my heart was at the
Yeah.
time. Those middle 2 years, that second year specifically, just from a personal perspective, was one of the hardest years of my life for multiple reasons. I've always wanted to be in charge. Like that's just kind of the way I'm wired, is I want to be making decisions. I want to be the leader, all of that good stuff. And that was since I was, a teenager all the way till now. I approached my leadership about that and I said, hey, I want to do this. I want to be in charge. And they gave me one of the greatest and most painful gifts that I've ever gotten when they looked me in the eye and said, no, you're not ready for that. And so that portion of it was really hard. And it was really difficult day after day to kind of bite my tongue about things that I felt should be different, But I wanted to really understand what Jimmy and Lori were trying to get to me. And ultimately, God, by the Spirit through them, was trying to get to me. And that was to lay a foundation of servanthood. And that was to lay a foundation of ultimately love. Because when you think about it, what I wanted to do was put myself in a position of power for the sake of myself, which is ultimately pride and, self-love, right? But what the Lord is trying to teach me through all of these things in those middle 2 years is to lay myself down in the same way that he did, to lay myself down and to put myself under the authority of others as an act of love. And those middle 2 years, I didn't understand all of the broad ideology behind it.
Mm.
It was more just, it's really hard to grit my teeth right now. And then that last year, they felt like I asked again if I could be in a leadership role, and they felt that I had come to a place where I was able to handle that. And looking back, it was a stretch that I was able to handle that. I think it was the Lord's hand guiding a lot of events and interacting with the events of my life to bring me to a place of understanding that love is really what he's after. It's not positional power and it's not leadership. It's none of those things. It's that he wants to form me into a person of love,
Yeah, that's a hard thing to learn and takes longer than a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was really difficult and painful.
And probably a lifelong lesson,
100%.
right?
Absolutely.
For lots of us,
Yes.
myself included.
I have not arrived
Right.
after those 2 years.
Do
No,
we ever?
100%. Yes.
And you had mentioned that this was a really difficult period in life. Was that was that why? Just because of that having
Yeah.
to learn that lesson?
I think that was a portion of it. After I'd gotten saved that first year, there was this period with Jesus, and C.S. Lewis talks about this a little bit in his writings, of almost like a honeymoon period where like it was just so easy for me to sit with God. And it was so easy for me to really enjoy reading scripture and to do all the spiritual disciplines. It was so easy, and like the word that comes to mind is just blissful. Like it was so good. And then about 6 or 7 months in, I started really wrestling with the questions of faith that are hard. Like, why do I believe that God exists? And why do I believe that if a God exists, that Jesus is that God? Why? And so I started wrestling through all these. I started to have a crisis of faith. I'm 20 years old. I've never had to wrestle with these questions before because that was just the culture that I grew up in. Was like, we believe this because we believe this, and that's just kind of it, period. And that wasn't good enough for me anymore. I walked around that second year with just this huge burden in my mind and in my heart of, do I really believe the things that I'm singing every night, And I felt disingenuine all of the time because I was up in front of all these people declaring the goodness and love of God that I wasn't sure I believed in. And so there was a lot weighing on me. I had a relationship that I was trying to deal with that was not very healthy. And then I was doing college at the time. So and then traveling is its own thing. So I had all of these things kind of compounding on me in that second year that I just did not know how to handle emotionally or intellectually, that I was just carrying, and that I really wasn't. I let a few people in onto those things, like Jimmy, my pastor, and a couple others that I really trusted. But other than that, there was not really anybody else that I was letting in on this. And so it was just something that I was trying to carry by myself, and I felt really isolated. And that second year was super, super hard because of that. So yeah.
And it sounds like God didn't meet you in that, and you turned a corner in a sense.
Yeah.
Because you come back.
Right.
Again
Right.
and again, and you're back the fourth year.
Right.
And what was part of the sweetness of being on the road? Because I imagine, it's great, right? You're traveling with like your best friends.
Yeah.
There's some challenges, but what was the sweetness of it?
It's got to be the people. And I'm sure you've heard that before with the people that you've been interviewing. But I mentioned earlier that it was the people that I fell in love with that kind of got me in the door. And it's the people that had me coming back. Like, it's not hyperbole to say that these people become your best friends. They're the people that you spend 10 to 12 hours with at least 6 days a week, if not 7. And that's what keeps you coming back. It's not necessarily the content, while the content is great. It's not even necessarily the work, while the work is awesome. It's the relationships that you build. And it's the people that you're with that I would consider. I think the way you put it was really, really beautiful. The sweetness of the road.
Yeah. And it's interesting that a lot of these conversations drive back to relationships.
Yeah.
And like we are people seeking a relationship with God. We are like built for relationships.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of the secret sauce of Life Action too, is that you have this intentional community where these transformations are happening, but they're happening in relationships.
Yes.
And then you're going into churches and you're asking them
Yeah.
to be open and honest and vulnerable
Yeah.
in front of, and actually maybe turn towards each other and have relationships
Right.
that they maybe haven't had. So
Yes.
like, have you thought about like the power of that whole relationship concept in terms of like what we do in general in Life Action?
I think the way you put it is beautiful. We are made for a relationship. You know, when we think about the Christian paradigm for who God is, he is a Trinitarian community in and of himself,
Mhm.
right? And so, because God is a community, so to speak, we are made for community.
Mhm.
We are made to emulate and image the love of the Trinity with each other.
Mhm.
And that's at the heart of everything that Life Action is trying to do is we're creating context and space for first a relational encounter with
Mhm.
Jesus.
Mhm.
And what that does when you have a relational encounter with Jesus is it inevitably bleeds out into the other relationships of your life, or at least it should.
Yeah.
But it's all driven by and based in relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how God has wired us and then how he reorients
Yeah.
our heart,
Yeah.
for
Absolutely.
relationships. I got to ask about host homes.
Okay. Yes.
So tell me.
That's a fun
I
topic.
mean, that's a whole
Yeah.
topic,
Oh,
right?
100%.
Of
Yeah.
like, not only are we going into churches, but we're also going into homes. Like
Yes.
they are hosting
Yeah.
college-age kids in their homes for a week at a time,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
What's that whole thing like?
It is great and hard.
Yeah.
It's beautiful and it's hard.
Uh-huh.
The host homes are a ministry in and of itself. Yes, there's the platform, but then you're going home to the people that you've been on a platform in front of. And we mentioned earlier, this gap between what you believe and how you live.
Mhm.
You're living out in a host home what you're saying you believe, which can be beautiful and it can be hard. Because when I have worked a 10, 12-hour day at church and I come home and I'm staying with a really sweet older couple who just doesn't get out
Mhm.
very often and they just want to talk for the
Mhm.
next hour,
Mhm.
I am beat and I'm really tired. And that might sound like, hike up your boots and just
Sure.
talk to them, but it can be really hard.
Oh,
It
it's
can be
every
really
day.
difficult. It's every day, right? It's
There's
every
no
day.
turning off.
There's no turning off. And so that can be really difficult. But then on the other side of the coin, those conversations, if you stay in them long enough, become really beautiful moments where you get insight from the Spirit from an older, wiser couple, or you find connections that you didn't know were there.
Yeah.
Or that's the relational piece that you and I were discussing. That's where the connection and the bond really happens, is when you make the choice to lean into those conversations. And it's hard. It's like there have been so many times where I've looked at my roommate and just said, I can't tonight. And
Mhm.
and we're gonna grit our teeth and we're gonna do it,
Mhm.
And that might sound really harsh, but that's just human.
Yeah.
Like that's just like
Yeah.
people get tired,
Yeah.
And so yeah, all of that to say, it is beautiful but hard.
Yeah. Because on the other side of that, I can imagine probably 100% of the time,
Yeah.
you're like, I'm so glad I did that.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, good things are hard things
Right.
sometimes.
For me, like I get really excited about interactions with people.
Mhm.
I walk away and I'm just like beaming
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's really one of the most impactful things we hear too we get thousands and thousands of Dear Teen letters every year from people who've been impacted by an event in their church.
Yeah.
And so many times we hear of host families saying, I wasn't sure I wanted to host.
Understandably.
But by the first or second night, I never wanted these kids to leave.
Mm.
And like just they're so inspired by seeing these young kids live out what they're hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
That like so many times people have written like, I want to be like them,
Oh.
And so that's
Wow.
I love the like multi-generational aspect of it too.
Absolutely.
Like just learning about each other and learning about Jesus through the relationships of each other.
Yes.
Super cool.
That is awesome.
So why did you decide to come off the road? Because
Mm.
probably 2-ish years is like
Yeah.
average, or 1 to 2 years
Yeah,
average.
that's around
You go a
average.
couple years longer, and
Yeah.
then what happens?
Well, so it was a mix of things. I think those middle 2 years really did a number on me emotionally and mentally, and there was a lot of healing that needed to happen that I wasn't thinking this consciously when I was making the decision, but I think looking back, like I wasn't ready to go live out in the world outside of the context of Life Action quite yet. I did my 4 years of traveling during the 4 years that people typically do college. So I'm still really young during this time, and I'm in a lot of formative years. And I don't think looking back that I was ready to go live on my own quite
Okay.
yet. It was less that I felt I needed to stay and more that there wasn't a sense that I needed to leave
Mhm.
quite yet,
Mhm.
you know? When you become integrated into a community that's that tight knit,
Yeah.
it's hard to leave. It's hard to make the decision to leave. And so I just never felt that I had a good reason to leave quite yet. Until after that fourth year, there was just this sense that it was time.
Mhm.
It was my time to move on. And I didn't know where that was going to take me. I didn't know how that was going to look, but I felt that there was confirmation from my community over that. I gave that over to my community and just said, I think this is where I'm going. And they were like, yes, we think that's right. And so I just felt that that was the direction that I needed to go. And I honestly had no idea where it was going to take me,
Mhm.
but I felt such a peace come over me about it
Mm.
where I was like, I really do think that this is the right decision. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, how do you go from the team to becoming part of staff?
Yeah. So I got off the team in May of 2023. And it was actually kind of a crazy story. So I made the decision that I was going to go off the road, but I had no idea where I was going to go. I could have gone home. I had an offer at a church somewhere else. But I really wanted to move up here to the
Mm.
South Bend, Michiana area because I loved this community and I loved the people up here and the people that I had come to travel with on the road. There were a ton of them up here that I knew I had friendship with,
Mhm.
and that I could find a home with, a relational home with. And so I just gave that over to the Lord and I said, Lord, I would love to move this direction, but I ultimately want to move in the direction that you would have me to go. I just felt like there was no direction. I continued for, I don't know, probably over a month, just every day being like, Lord, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? Open doors, please. And there was a door that opened to a church in Atlanta that I could have gone and been a worship pastor at, but I continued to give that over to the Lord. And it finally came decision time of like, okay, I need to go a direction because practical things have to happen,
Mhm.
like a house and a car
Mhm.
and all these different things. And so I was like, Lord, I haven't felt a strong sense from you, but just like, I'm going to go this direction. If it's wrong, shut it down, you
Mhm.
know? And so I make the decision to start making moves toward this area. And within like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month after that conversation with Jesus, I had a job, I had a house, and I had a car.
Mhm.
All of those things just provided for me.
Mm.
And I had no money
Wow.
to be able to go pursue those things on my own.
Mhm.
Those were all just opportunities that were given to me. And so that felt like real confirmation and
Yeah.
real like stamp of approval from the Holy Spirit of like, yes, you're going the direction I would have you to go.
Mhm.
Thank you for trusting me,
Yeah.
which was such a beautiful experience. And so I moved up here in August of 2023 and I started a landscaping job over in St. Joe. And I did that for about 4 months. And that was, one of those things where everybody's had a job that's just kind of a job,
Yeah.
and the people there were so great. But it's just the work itself was not me,
Mhm.
there was a ton of value that came from it. I learned a ton, but the work itself was not me. And then Lori approached me about the mailroom position that I'm currently in. There had been an opening. And so I prayed about it, thought about it, and I kind of just did it. There was a ton of trepidation of like, is this the right decision? Am
Sure.
I going to go? But I went and I did it, and it's been amazing. The past year that I've almost a year now that I've been working here at headquarters, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
There's been so much fruit that's come from it. It's been
Yeah.
great.
When you say there's been so much fruit, like what do you feel like
Yeah.
God's doing with you in your current role,
Yeah.
being a part of
Yeah.
the staff here?
There's been so much fruit in the aspect of if you would have given me the opportunity to come do this position, say 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been offended because it's not a leadership role, quote
Mhm.
unquote. And it's not a role where there's a ton of decision making capability. Um, but the more that I was in the mailroom as I started, I just remember having several moments with Jesus where there was an invitation from the Spirit for me to just say, if this is where you have me for the next 40 years, if this is like it for the rest of my
Mhm.
life, this is what I want to do then,
Mm.
And at that point, you're trusting in God, not for something, but you're just simply trusting in God.
Mm.
And that's where your peace and your rest and your contentment and your
Mm.
happiness comes from. Is not in this thing that you hope God's going to give you or this position that you hope you're going to get one day, but just simply the person of Jesus by the Spirit is
Yeah.
your ultimate hope. I think also there's been it's almost similar to my first year on the road where you see everybody living it out and you're in an environment where people actually follow Jesus. And it's just a beautiful
Hmm.
thing to
Yeah,
both see and experience.
that's really cool. And you've had the opportunity to kind of see life action from different angles.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, and then I know you're here because God wants you to be here, right? But what is it about like what we do
Yeah.
that it keeps you here or that you like buy into? Because it's
Yeah.
hard to be a part of something if you don't
Yeah.
buy into what
Yeah.
the mission is, right?
People here genuinely want others to have a transformative encounter with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And not just have an encounter with Jesus one time, but to live what we would call the revived life. That is truly the heartbeat of many of the people here, to encounter Jesus in such a way that you cannot walk away unchanged, you know? And, we go through seasons where that's harder to achieve than other seasons and where we're more energized and more encouraged. But it really is kind of the North Star for a lot of us here is we want to see people live a life that is transformed by Jesus in such a way that
Mm-hmm.
there's no room in their being for anything but love and
Yeah.
joy and
Yeah.
peace,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Have you seen that happen? Like being out on the road?
Yeah. I have. I mean, even just incrementally,
Uh-huh.
because, I expressed we need to be pervaded
Mm-hmm.
by God's love in such a way, that happens over a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times what I think we see, especially on the road,
Mm-hmm.
is much more of we're seeing the seeds of transformation
Mm-hmm.
happening. There are certainly encounters where you walk away different, but that's just simply the starting line. We think about the whole paradigm in the New Testament of being born again, right? When you are born, that is the beginning of life. And when you are born again, it is the beginning of a new life. It is not just simply that experience that is the whole of the transformed life or the whole of the Christian life. It is the other 50, 60, 70, 80 years after that conversion moment that we're looking for, that Jesus is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're on the road and when we're here in the office, a lot of times what we see is maybe not new birth as much, but we definitely see seeds later on of maturity.
Mm-hmm.
And those take time to water. Jesus often compares humans to a tree. You will know a tree by its fruit, talking about humans. And the thing with trees is trees take a long time to
Mm-hmm.
grow into maturity, and they take a long time and a lot of cultivation and a lot of effort on the part of the gardener to come to a place of maturity to bear fruit. And so we're seeing a lot of the small seeds of transformation along with the big encounters. So it can be really encouraging in that way, especially, you read the Dear Team letters, and even if you don't visibly see it, people are telling us that like, hey, Jesus really grabbed a hold of me over this subject. And it was hard, but there's so much freedom that came from it.
Yeah. You never get tired of reading those.
No, you don't.
Week
No.
after week. You'd never get tired of reading those. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You mentioned growth like a tree and
Yeah.
maturity. I know that you also kind of have a heart for mentorship, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Really early on in my journey with Jesus, I encountered a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And I'd kind of grown up with a paradigm of you just kind of read your Bible and you pray. And when I mean pray, what I mean by prayer is like intercessory prayer, where like I ask for things. And that was kind of it. Those were kind of the things that you did in order to have life with God. But this book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, introduced me to this idea of apprenticing under Jesus. That is our task as followers of Jesus, is to apprentice under him as if we were apprenticing under a tradesman. But instead of learning a practical skill, you can learn practical skills apprenticing under Jesus, but instead of learning like a hands-on skill, Jesus is teaching you how to become a type of person. And I'm so compelled by that vision of Jesus turning people into the vision that he has always had for humanity. We look at Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and 3, and it seems clear to me that God, at the beginning of all things, made people good, even very good. And so what Jesus is doing is he's taking the broken, sinful, messy people that we have become through sin, and he's transforming us into the ultimate vision, the ultimate original and vision that he had for people to be. And we get to hop on that vision and partner with him in that as disciples of Jesus to become everything that Jesus has always intended us to be, which is loving and joyful and peaceful and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. So I've been so compelled by that vision of apprentices to Jesus that I want other people to learn how to be apprentices under
Mhm.
Jesus. Yeah.
Do you see that in terms of like maybe younger people coming into Life
Yeah.
Action,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
where would that influence
Yeah.
play out?
I think it can play out in two areas really, really well.
Mhm.
Firstly, is a program that we have at
Mhm.
Life Action called our Crew Program.
Mhm.
These are 14 to 18-year-old volunteers that come in primarily during the summer months, and they come in and they help work our summer camp. What we don't want is for them to just come in and just be production for us
Mhm.
or just be hands to do the labor that we want. We want them to come in and we want them to have a transformative encounter with Jesus that
Yeah.
leads them into being an apprentice of Jesus, where they become pervaded by his love and where they become people who, at the core of their being, love God with everything that they have and love their neighbors really, really well,
Mhm.
you know? And so that's one way that, especially in those formative years,
Yeah.
14 to 18, arguably
Mhm.
the most formative years of your life, we want to be able to present them with this framework for following Jesus that they've maybe never heard before,
Yeah.
you know? And then the other way that it can work itself out is with our slightly older group of volunteers still that we call road team members. This is your 18 to 25-year-olds, still in really formative years. And we want them to, again, not just be people who come in and train to do a specific job so that we can go out on the road. We want them to encounter the same thing that we're asking other people to encounter,
Mhm.
to live, as we've said multiple times now, to live what they say they believe and what
Mhm.
we say we believe. This is much more than just becoming a Christian. This is becoming a kind of person, particularly the kind of person that Jesus was when he
Mhm.
walked around the earth and still is today. And so we want to be a huge influence on 14 to 25-year-olds to not just go to the good place when you die,
Mhm.
but to become the kind of person who is at the base level deeply loving and deeply joyful. Yeah.
Mhm. Will your first book be called Mailroom Ministry?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I mean,
If
that's a
you do
great
call
thought.
it
It's a
that,
it's a
can I
great
have it?
memoir title.
It
It's a
really
great memoir title.
is. It really is.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe not your first book, maybe your last book.
Maybe right before I go be with Jesus. Maybe that's it.
I bring that up because I think you are so faithful in the small things
Thank you.
that it has a way of permeating into all the big things
Hmm.
too,
Hmm.
right? Like as a mom, I learned that the small things are the big things, like the nightly routines that I have with my kids and what I say to them at night.
Yeah,
Just the tiny little things years later become the big things.
absolutely.
And that's kind of the sense that I get from you, right? Like even in the small
Thank you.
things, like you are faithful. I don't know. I just think that speaks to like the experience that you've had within the ministry, but also
Yeah.
like what you've learned about yourself and what God's shown you about yourself. So
Yeah.
I just think that's cool.
Thank you.
When you think about like what you hope for the impact that this ministry has, or
Yeah.
like what are your hopes for this ministry? Because the ministry is made up of people who
Yeah.
are leaning on each other and trusting in God. So like
Yeah.
what do you hope for the ministry when you think about it?
I think the hope that I would have for our ministry is related to something that I've been reflecting on lately. Like we as humans, we talk often about like what are your dreams? Like we ask kids really early, what's your dream? What do you want to do when you grow up?
Mhm.
I think it's a really beautiful question, a really good question to ask people. What are the visions that you have for life? What I find so interesting is that God has dreams too,
Mhm.
you know? And that just struck me in a different way recently. I think the hope that I would have for Life Action is that we would ask Jesus by the Spirit in a genuine, honest way, like, Lord, what are your dreams for
Mhm.
Life Action?
Mm.
When you imagine the impact that Life Action could have, what is the joyful, beautiful vision that stirs in your heart, God?
Mhm.
And my hope is that we would look at that vision, discern that vision, and say, yes.
Mhm.
I really do hope that we continue to lean into this idea of we really want to just create context because we're not the people who bring the Spirit. The
Right.
Spirit moves where He wants. And so we just want to create a space where we are orienting ourselves as a community orienting ourselves around Jesus by the Spirit and praying that transformation happens in that, whatever capacity that takes, whether it's this kind of thing where there's a podcast video thing happening or whether it's physical space. We want to create space for Jesus to be able to step in and create goodness and
Yeah.
beauty and love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Changed Lives. If you were encouraged or inspired by what you heard, I want to invite you to take the next step. You can support the people whose story you just heard and others like them by visiting lifeaction.org/changedlives. Whether through prayer, giving, or sharing these stories, you can be part of what God is doing to revive relationships and transform lives.